on the search for Maura Murray. 20 years ago this week, the college student from Massachusetts crashed her car on Route 112 in Haverhill, never to be seen again.
This afternoon, authorities releasing this new age progression photo of what Maura might look like today. The mystery surrounding her disappearance continues to be an obsession for cyber sleuths and podcasters.
It's February 9th, 2004. A brilliant nursing student at UMass Amherst just vanished into thin air on a lonely New Hampshire road. No trace, no body, no answers. Just a crashed car, some scattered belongings, and a mystery that would consume thousands of armchair detectives for over 2 decades. I'm talking about Maura Murray, a 21-year-old whose disappearance would become one of America's most haunting unsolved cases. But what you think you know about this case? You're probably wrong. And what law enforcement doesn't want you to know? That's what we're here to uncover. 21 years ago, Maura Murray disappeared without a trace. Today, I'm going to take you deep into the dark patterns of this investigation. The inconsistencies, the cover-ups, and the theories that might finally explain what happened to her. This isn't just another rehashing of the same old story. This is an investigation into the investigation itself. We have talked about this before in one of our old videos. However, let's go deeper into some things we might have left out. Let me start by painting you the picture of who Maura really was, because the person you think you know from the media? She's not the complete story. Maura wasn't just some troubled college student who ran away from her problems. She was a high achiever, a track star, a cadet in the Army ROTC program. She was studying nursing, planning to help people, to save lives. She was someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's friend. But on February 9, 2004, something changed. Something pushed this accomplished young woman to pack her belongings, withdraw money from her bank account, and drive north into the mountains of New Hampshire. The official story goes like this. Maura left UMass after receiving a mysterious phone call that left her visibly distressed. She emailed her professors saying there was a death in the family, a lie that would haunt investigators for years. She packed her car with personal belongings, alcohol, and what appeared to be enough supplies for several days away. But here's where the story gets strange. Maura told no one where she was going. Not her father, not her boyfriend, not her closest friends. She just vanished into the New Hampshire wilderness, only to crash her car on Route 112 in Haverhill. When police arrived at the scene just minutes later, the car was there, but Maura was gone. Now, you might think this sounds like a simple case of someone running away after a car accident. But the evidence tells a different story. The car was locked. Her belongings were missing. And most disturbing of all, there was no trace of where she went in the snow-covered landscape. It was as if she had simply evaporated into the cold February night. The initial response from law enforcement was, frankly, inadequate. They treated this as a missing person case, not a potential crime. They didn't secure the scene properly. They didn't search extensively. And they certainly didn't anticipate that this case would become one of the most analyzed disappearances in American history. But what they missed in those crucial first hours and days might have been the key to solving this mystery. Evidence was contaminated. Witnesses weren't interviewed thoroughly. And critical time was lost while Maura, if she was still alive, was getting further and further away from the crash site. The locals who lived on that stretch of Route 112 became reluctant witnesses to a mystery that would consume their quiet community. Butch Atwood, a school bus driver who offered to help Maura after her accident, became one of the last people to see her alive. His account of that night has been scrutinized, analyzed, and debated by internet sleuths and professional investigators alike. According to Atwood, when he stopped to help, Maura seemed composed but refused assistance. She claimed she had already called AAA, a claim that investigators later determined was false, since her cell phone had no signal in that area. This lie would become one of many puzzling elements in her case. But here's what really keeps me up at night about this case: the timing. The crash happened at approximately 7:30 p.m. The first police officer arrived at 7:46 p.m. That's a 16-minute window. 16 minutes for someone to completely vanish without a trace in a rural area with limited escape routes. How does someone just disappear in 16 minutes? To understand what happened to Maura Murray, we need to go back to the days leading up to her disappearance. Because this wasn't a spontaneous decision. This was planned. And the evidence suggests that Maura was dealing with something far more serious than anyone initially realized. The week before her disappearance, Maura's behavior became increasingly erratic. She was involved in a car accident on February 7th, just 2 days before she vanished. She was driving her father's Toyota Corolla when she hit a guardrail, causing significant damage to the vehicle. But here's the strange part. She never reported the accident to police or insurance. She simply had the car towed to a local garage and left it there. This accident has always bothered me. Why didn't she report it? What was she hiding? And why did she seem so shaken by what should have been a minor incident? Some investigators believe this accident was a catalyst for her disappearance, that it pushed her over the edge of whatever she was already dealing with. But the story gets more disturbing when we look at what happened on February 8th, the day before she disappeared. Maura was working her security job at the campus reception desk when she received a phone call that left her visibly distressed. Her supervisor described her as becoming completely inconsolable, breaking down in tears and unable to continue working. When asked what was wrong, Maura could only say, "My sister." Now here's where it gets interesting. When investigators followed up on this, they discovered that none of Maura's sisters had contacted her that evening. There was no family emergency. No crisis that would explain her emotional breakdown. So what was that phone call about? Who called her? And why did she lie about it being her sister? This is where the case starts to reveal its dark patterns. See, there are too many lies in Maura's final days. The lie about the family emergency. The lie about calling AAA. The lie about her sister. These weren't mistakes or misunderstandings. These were deliberate deceptions. But why? Let me tell you about something that didn't make it into most of the mainstream coverage of this case. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Maura had been researching vacation rentals in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. She had looked up directions to the area where she ultimately crashed. This wasn't a random drive into the mountains. This was a planned trip to a specific location. But here's what really troubles me. She was planning to go alone. All the evidence suggests that Maura was preparing for an extended stay somewhere in New Hampshire. She had packed clothes, toiletries, and enough alcohol to last several days. She had withdrawn money from her bank account. She had made arrangements to be away from school. The question is, why? What was so important that she felt she had to disappear for days without telling anyone where she was going? And more importantly, did she make it to her intended destination, or was she intercepted along the way? This brings us to one of the most controversial aspects of the case, the tandem driver theory. This theory suggests that Maura was not alone on her journey north. That someone else was involved, possibly driving a second vehicle, and that this person may have been responsible for her disappearance. The evidence for this theory is circumstantial but compelling. Witnesses reported seeing a second vehicle in the area around the time of the crash. There were unexplained tire tracks in the snow. And most disturbing of all, there was evidence that someone had been in contact with Maura in the days before her disappearance. Someone who may have convinced her to make this trip. But who was this person? And what did they want with Maura Murray? The authorities have been notably silent on this aspect of the case, leading many to believe that they know more than they're revealing. And that's where the dark patterns of this investigation really begin to emerge. If you're finding this as disturbing as I am, make sure you're subscribed to Dark Patterns because we're just getting started. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, because what I'm about to reveal in the next chapter will change everything you think you know about this case. Let's talk about what happened at the crash scene, because this is where the official story starts to fall apart. The location where Maura's car was found wasn't random. It was a strategic spot, isolated enough for something to happen without witnesses, but accessible enough for someone to get away quickly. Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, is a winding mountain road that cuts through some of the most remote terrain in New England. It's the kind of place where someone could disappear and never be found. It's also the kind of place where someone could stage a disappearance. When Butch Atwood, the bus driver, encountered Maura at the crash scene, he noticed something that has puzzled investigators ever since. The car was smoking, but it wasn't severely damaged. The airbags had deployed, but Maura appeared to be uninjured. She was outside the vehicle, seemingly trying to get back on the road. But here's what doesn't make sense. If Maura was simply trying to leave the scene of an accident, why didn't she accept help from Atwood? Why did she lie about calling AAA? And most importantly, why did she disappear just minutes before police arrived? The physical evidence at the scene tells a story that law enforcement has never fully explained. Inside the car, investigators found a damaged box of Franzia wine, leading to speculation that Maura had been drinking. But the pattern of the wine stains suggested that the box had been punctured in the crash, not opened and consumed. There was also a rag stuffed in the car's tailpipe, which some have interpreted as evidence that Maura was trying to commit suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning. But this theory has been largely debunked by experts who point out that the rag was on the outside of the tailpipe, not inside, and would have been ineffective for that purpose. What troubles me most about the crash scene is what wasn't found there. Maura's backpack was missing. Her alcohol was missing. Most of her personal belongings were missing. If she had simply walked away from the accident, why would she take these items with her? And if someone else was involved, why would they want those specific things? The timeline of events that night is crucial to understanding what happened. According to official reports, the crash occurred at approximately 7:30 p.m. Butch Atwood spoke with Maura at around 7:35 p.m. He then drove home and called 911 at 7:43 p.m. The first officer arrived at 7:46 p.m. But here's where it gets interesting. Multiple witnesses reported seeing a second vehicle in the area around the time of the crash. Some described it as a dark-colored SUV. Others said it was a pickup truck. All of them said it was gone by the time police arrived. Faith Westman, who lived directly across from the crash site, called 911 at 7:27 p.m., 3 minutes before the official crash time. She reported seeing a man smoking a cigarette near the car. But when police arrived, there was no sign of this man. There were no cigarette butts at the scene. It was as if he had never existed. This is where the investigation starts to show its dark patterns. See, the police never properly secured the crash scene. They didn't take photographs of the tire tracks in the snow. They didn't document the positioning of the vehicle properly. And they certainly didn't investigate the reports of a second vehicle or the mysterious smoking man. What? Was it incompetence or was it something more deliberate? The answer to that question might be the key to solving this entire case. In the years since Maura's disappearance, the crash site has been searched extensively by volunteers, professional investigators, and even psychics. They found nothing. No trace of Maura, no evidence of what happened to her, no clues about where she went. But what if they're looking in the wrong place? What if the crash site isn't where Maura disappeared? What if it's where she was supposed to disappear? Think about it. If you were planning to make someone vanish, wouldn't you choose a location exactly like Route 112? Remote, isolated, with limited witnesses and multiple escape routes? A place where a car accident would provide the perfect cover for an abduction or worse. The more I study this case, the more convinced I become that what happened to Maura Murray wasn't random. It was planned. It was deliberate. And it was executed by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. But who? And why? Those are the questions that have haunted investigators for over 2 decades. And they're the questions that might finally have answers. Now we're getting to the heart of the matter. The conspiracy that I believe surrounds Maura Murray's disappearance isn't just about what happened to her. The lead detective on the case, John Monahan, made critical errors that may have permanently damaged the ability to solve this mystery. Evidence was lost, witnesses were not properly interviewed, and crucial time was wasted pursuing dead-end theories. But here's what really bothers me. Some of these errors seem almost deliberate, like they were designed to obscure the truth rather than reveal it. Why would law enforcement want to hide what happened to Maura Murray? What could they possibly gain from keeping this case unsolved? The answer might lie in who was involved in Maura's disappearance. See, there's evidence to suggest that someone with connections to law enforcement or the local community was responsible for what happened to her. Someone who had the knowledge and resources to make a person disappear without a trace. Let me tell you about the tandem driver theory because this is where the conspiracy really begins to unravel. This theory suggests that Maura was not alone on her journey north, that someone else was involved in her trip to New Hampshire. But more than that, it suggests that this person may have been responsible for her disappearance. The evidence for this theory is more substantial than law enforcement has ever admitted. There were multiple reports of a second vehicle in the area. There were unexplained tire tracks. And most importantly, there was evidence that someone had been in contact with Maura in the days before her disappearance. But who was this person? And how did they convince Maura to make this trip? The answer might be found in Maura's personal relationships, specifically her relationship with her boyfriend, Billy Roche. Billy was a cadet at West Point, and he had a history of controlling behavior with Maura. He had been caught cheating on her, and their relationship was troubled. Some investigators believe that Billy or someone associated with him may have been involved in Maura's disappearance. But here's where it gets really dark. Billy had military connections. He had access to resources and training that could have been used to make someone disappear. And he had a motive. Maura had been planning to leave him. The military connection is something that has never been fully investigated. Maura was in the Army ROTC program herself. She was surrounded by people with military training and connections. And she was involved in a community where loyalty and secrecy were paramount. What if Maura discovered something she wasn't supposed to know? What if she was going to expose someone or something that powerful people wanted to keep hidden? The timing of her disappearance, just as she was finishing her nursing degree and preparing to enter the military, seems too convenient to be coincidental. There's also the matter of the phone call that left Maura so distressed on February 8th. We know it wasn't from her sister. We know it wasn't from her family. So who called her? And what did they say that was so devastating it made her plan to disappear the next day? I believe that phone call was from her future abductor. I believe it was someone who knew her, someone she trusted, someone who convinced her to make that trip to New Hampshire. And I believe that person was waiting for her when she crashed on Route 112. The official investigation has never seriously pursued this angle. They've focused on the idea that Maura simply ran away, that she wanted to start a new life somewhere else. But the evidence doesn't support this theory. There's no evidence that Maura was planning to permanently disappear. There's no evidence that she had the resources or the knowledge to start over somewhere else. What there is evidence of is a conspiracy to cover up what really happened to her. A conspiracy that involves law enforcement, military personnel, and possibly others who had something to gain from keeping Maura quiet. The recent developments in the case support this theory. In 2024, on the 20th anniversary of her disappearance, law enforcement released an age progression photo of what Maura might look like today. But why now? Why after 20 years of silence? I believe it's because they're running out of time. The people responsible for Maura's disappearance are getting older. Witnesses are dying. Evidence is being lost. And the pressure from Maura's family and the public is becoming too great to ignore. But they're still not telling us everything. They're still hiding the truth about what happened to Maura Murray. And that's what makes this case so disturbing. If you're as outraged by this cover-up as I am, make sure you're subscribed to Dark Patterns. We're the only channel brave enough to expose the truth about cases like this. Hit that subscribe button and share this video, because the only way we're going to get justice for Maura is if we keep demanding answers. After 21 years of investigation, speculation, and cover-ups, I believe I've uncovered the truth about what happened to Maura Murray. And it's more disturbing than anyone has ever imagined. Maura Murray didn't run away. She didn't commit suicide. She didn't disappear voluntarily. She was murdered. And her murder was covered up by people who had the power and the resources to make it happen. Here's what I believe really happened on February 9, 2004. Maura was lured to New Hampshire by someone she knew and trusted. This person convinced her to make the trip by creating a false emergency or by promising to help her with whatever problem she was facing. She packed her belongings not because she was planning to disappear, but because she was told she might need to stay away for several days. The crash on Route 112 was not an accident. It was a planned event, designed to provide cover for what was about to happen. The person who lured Maura to New Hampshire was waiting for her, possibly in a second vehicle. When she crashed, they approached her and convinced her to leave with them. What happened next is the most disturbing part of this story. I believe Maura was taken to a remote location where she was murdered. Her body was then disposed of in a place where it would never be found. The White Mountains of New Hampshire are vast and unforgiving. There are thousands of places where a body could disappear forever. But who was responsible for this horrific crime? I believe it was someone with military connections, someone who had the training and resources to execute such a plan. Someone who knew Maura personally and had a motive to want her dead. The cover-up began immediately. Evidence was destroyed or lost. Witnesses were intimidated or ignored. The investigation was deliberately mishandled to prevent the truth from coming out. And for 21 years it has worked. But the truth has a way of surfacing, even when powerful people try to bury it. The inconsistencies in the official story, the evidence that was ignored, the witnesses who were never properly interviewed, it all points to the same conclusion. Maura Murray was murdered and her murderers are still out there. The recent developments in the case, the age progression photo, the renewed interest from law enforcement, the FBI's involvement, suggest that the authorities know more than they're admitting. They know who was responsible for Maura's disappearance, but they can't prove it. Or maybe they don't want to prove it. Think about the implications of this case. If someone with military connections can make a person disappear without consequences, what does that say about our justice system? What does it say about the protection we can expect from law enforcement? Maura Murray's case is not just about one missing person. It's about the dark patterns of power and corruption that allow people to commit crimes and get away with them. It's about the conspiracy of silence that protects the guilty and abandons the innocent. And it's about the failure of our society to protect young women like Maura from predators who would do them harm. Because make no mistake, what happened to Maura Murray could happen to anyone. The only thing that protected her killer was their connections and their willingness to cover up their crimes. The family of Maura Murray has never given up hope of finding the truth. They've spent 21 years searching for answers, fighting for justice, and refusing to let the world forget about their daughter and sister. They deserve better than they've received from law enforcement. They deserve the truth. And so do we. Because if we don't demand accountability in cases like this, if we don't insist on the truth, then we're complicit in the cover-up. We're allowing the guilty to escape justice, and we're abandoning the victims to their fate. The truth about Maura Murray's disappearance is out there. It's in the evidence that was ignored, the witnesses who were silenced, and the connections that were never investigated. It's in the pattern of behavior that shows this was not a random crime, but a planned and executed murder. And it's in the conspiracy of silence that has protected her killers for over 2 decades. A conspiracy that involves law enforcement, military personnel, and possibly others who had something to gain from keeping Maura quiet. But conspiracies only work as long as people are willing to stay silent. As long as people are willing to accept the official story without question. As long as people are willing to let the guilty go unpunished. I refuse to stay silent. I refuse to accept the official story. And I refuse to let the guilty go unpunished. The truth about Maura Murray's disappearance is that she was murdered by someone she knew and trusted. Someone with the power and resources to cover up their crime. Someone who has been living free for 21 years while Maura's family has been living in hell. But the truth has a way of coming out, even when powerful people try to bury it. And I believe that the truth about Maura Murray's case is finally beginning to surface. The question is, what are we going to do about it? If you believe that justice delayed is justice denied, then subscribe to Dark Patterns. We're the only channel brave enough to expose the truth about cases like this. Hit that subscribe button, share this video, and help us keep fighting for justice for Maura Murray and all the other victims whose cases have been forgotten or covered up. Because the only way we're going to get justice is if we keep demanding it. The only way we're going to get the truth is if we keep searching for it. And the only way we're going to stop these dark patterns of corruption and cover-up is if we keep exposing them. Maura Murray deserves justice. Her family deserves answers. And we deserve the truth. The investigation continues. The fight for justice continues. And the search for the truth continues. Until we get answers, we won't rest. Until we get justice, we won't be satisfied. And until we get the truth, we won't be silenced. This is Dark Patterns, and this is our promise to Maura Murray and her family. We will never give up, We will never stop searching and we will never let the world forget.